Happy Friday, FloRacing. My name is Courtney Enders, and I am so pumped to welcome you to the very first episode of the very first drag racing podcast here on FloRacing. Now, FloRacing, not a stranger to motorsports, but drag racing is a little bit of an up-and-comer at FloRacing, and it's my duty here to enlighten you on the sport that I am most passionate about. So a little history about myself. Grew up in a drag racing home. My dad very much had passion for speed, competition, passed that along to my sister and I, where we started in the junior drag racing program. Somewhere along the mix and success of the junior drag racing program, Disney decided to make a movie on my sister called Right on Track, hence the name of this podcast. Now, I was the co-star of that show, but this Right Off Track is me being the main star. And what I want to do is bring you all the relationships, all the knowledge, all the entertainment that I know and I have gained in my entire life traveling the NHRA drag racing series. So what are we going to get with Right Off Track? First things first, I want to talk about Castrol. Castrol and FloRacing making this happen. So we got to take care of a little housekeeping. This episode and every episode of Right Off Track is brought to you by Castrol Edge. It is 3 times stronger against viscosity breakdown than the leading full synthetic and gives your engine 10 times better high temperature performance than the industry standard when you need it most. Castrol Edge, better oil for maximum performance. So, Right Off Track, episode 1. I bet you're thinking she's going to bring her sister on. Some know me as the coattail rider of 5-time world champion Erica Enders, but that is not what today is about. Today, we are going to talk about the radial, outlaw, pro mod, bearded wonder, all things drag racing, one of the most passionate people I know about this sport, Lyle Barnett. So let's give it up for Lyle Barnett, the bearded wonder. Welcome to the show, Lyle. Lyle Barnett.
What is up?
So I've been on a million podcasts with you. This is my very first show. Can you first off believe that somebody gave me the keys to a podcast?
No, and I think they'll quickly realize that maybe that was their best worst idea or worst best idea. Whichever way you want to look at it. No, but
I think we'll go with that.
We've been on a bunch together. I feel like it's something you and I do well together, and I think the fans will enjoy this. I hope this isn't my last time on here. In fact, I hope we're back in a couple of weeks. Actually, it'll hit perfect. I'll probably be qualified number 1 at the World Series of Pro Mod right about the time you need to have another one of these. So it'll be perfect for me to go back to back.
So what you're saying is they're either going to get to know you really well here at FloRacing or become sick of seeing you.
Absolutely. And Ken Cartuccio hopes that this is the only time they ever see me. You're welcome, Ken.
No, I have a feeling we may need to get you both on together. But first things first, so this is new. We do all these drag racing specific niche shows, but this is something a little bit different. This is going to be on FloRacing where there's a ton of different kinds of racing. So I know that everybody in drag racing knows who you are. We all know your story, but just give the FloRacing fans a little bit of what you do, what classes you run, and kind of how you got started in drag racing.
So I guess my passion for anything motorsports related, well, anything with a motor, started at an early age. My grandfather drag raced before I was born. My dad hung it up when I was born. And did the father figure thing. We played sports. My mom would, between the two of them, were running me to some sporting event or some sporting venue somewhere. I had dirt bikes and 4-wheelers, did a little motocross style stuff early on, but nothing crazy. My first, I wouldn't say passion, but what I wanted to do to start with was race round track. So NASCAR style stuff. My best friend from home did that. His dad had a history in that, and I felt like that's what I wanted to do. We were actually on the way to buy my first late model, and my dad was like, man, what do you think about drag racing? And at the time, it just didn't matter to me. If it was loud, if it meant going fast, I was cool with it. And I was like, that's fine with me, So we go buy our first drag car. I raced 7.0 index for a while. We moved up to 6.0 index, bracket race for a couple years. X275 was really in its conception. At the time, that class was running 530s in the 8th mile. We built a car for that. We were always about a 10th behind. So by the time my car was finished, they were going teens and 20s, and I was in the 30s, and I kind of stayed that far away from the front runners at least until I gave it up in 2012 probably. And I started in 2008, something like that. So I drag radial raced, and really the only reason that you, Courtney Enders, knows who I am is because of my involvement in drag radio racing and where we're headed next week. Lights Out is one of the first big races I ever went to. I think Lights Out 2 or 3 is the first one I ever went to, and we're
you're showing your age
4.
there, buddy.
Yeah. Well, but I radio raced for years, and in fact, up until what I'm probably most known for, which was my crash in 2015, I radio raced until then. And I continued to radio race after my crash. But my crash is kind of where where the turning point in my career. While I would not suggest it, it has definitely been better for me than it was bad. And some people may take that the wrong way, but again, I would not do it again. And it's not something I suggest, but it definitely gave me a platform. I went on to be on Netflix in my little Fox Body Mustang Beer Money. That, along with my social media presence following that, led me to Elite Motorsports. I drove Pro Mod for you guys for a couple years, had a lot of success there. I won the first Pro Mod race for Elite. We won 3 together, including the U.S. Nationals this past year. And really, I feel like in the short time that I spent racing in HRA Pro Mod, I did everything I wanted to do except win a world championship. And it's not easy over there. Chris Thorne may have made it look easy this past year, but it's not easy to freaking win over there. You know, it was a lot of the times on the heels of a hole shot or a couple lucky rounds, you know, but Justin Elks, Ben Stoss, and Mike Earl, my crew, everybody at Elite, Richard Freeman, Erica, you, the Harristons, who technically owned the turbo car, right, when I started driving it. I owe it all to them. You know, they gave a guy they didn't know an opportunity, and I feel like we made almost the best of it, if not the best. So I guess that was a real quick way to get you where I am today and where we're headed. 23 is bright. I've got a lot of big things coming up that I hope we get to make huge announcements on right here on FloRacing later in the year. But for now, we're focused on the next 2 weeks, because between the next 2 weeks, it's probably going to be about all you and I can stand.
Yeah, you ain't lying there. It's about to kick up heavy. So I'm glad that you said a couple of things that you said. I don't want to spend too much time on your crash, on all the things pre what Lyle Barnett is today, but I think it's really important for the Flow audience to know what drives you and why you're so great behind the wheel and as an advocate for the sport. So one thing that I do want to touch on before we talk about all your accolades and the fun that we've had together is, you mentioned the crash first. Those of you guys who don't know, look up Lyle Barnett. He's told this story 100 times. I'm not going to make you retell it. There's been some incredible videos put together, some really emotional pieces that dive into what happened there. But something that, as your friend, that has always impressed me is the mental part of the comeback, the physical part, all of the hospital visits, all of that time that you spent there, all the physical pain. But what impresses me the most about you is the mental comeback that you did. And a post on Facebook was made the other day by Jeff Miles, and it really got me thinking. I was going to go a whole nother way with addressing this with you here until that post posted a picture of you flipping off the racetrack that tried to kill you, burnt down, same lane, same racetrack, and you poetically end up going and winning Lights Out, which we're going to touch on here in a minute as we educate the Flow audience on Lights Out. But talk to me just a little so the guys and gals can get to know the mental state of that day and that comeback of getting back in the car, same lane, same track that literally tried to kill you. How'd you do that?
Yeah. I decided very early after my crash that the fire in 2005, probably most known for, wasn't going to define me as a person. Like I said, it was definitely a platform, turning point. But I just decided it wasn't going to define me, that regardless of what happened, I was at least going to show my appreciation to the fans, my friends, my family, my supporters from literally around the globe that prayed for me, that donated money, that did all the things to bring me at least back to the racetrack. I wanted to prove to them my appreciation and show them that, that this isn't going to define me. And I decided I was going to drive a race car again. It was not a popular choice amongst those closest to me, but I told them I was going to do it, and I did. Almost a year, right at a year to date, about a year and 2 weeks after my crash, I got back in a fast radio car. Jason Digby, part owner and side operator of Mag's Fab Works out of Tupelo or Fulton, Mississippi. He owned a car, a 1969 Dodge Dart we call the Tooth Jerker. At the time was in pursuit to be the quickest and fastest leaf spring car in the world. In my first trip to the racetrack, we broke both ends of the record. And we continued to do that over the course of about the next year. But my first big race back at South Georgia was Lights Out 8, I think.
8, 6. Yep.
8, okay. Lights Out 8. Your trophy used to be back here, but we're about to move. But Lights Out 8, we go back there. I break the record for like the second or third time. Set it. I really, honestly, broke it a lot quicker in ET-wise than we ever thought would probably be ran again. But we continued to knock that down. I think we ended up going 413 or something like that on 275s and leaf springs at 185 miles an hour or something like that. The ET record has since been broken, but the mile per hour record still stands today, and that was 2017. Yeah, February of 2017. So again, another long-winded way to tell you that I just decided the crash wasn't going to define me as a person, and the phrase I live by from about 2 weeks after I got home from the hospital and still today is it just is what it is. I can't change anything about it at all. I can face everything and rise, or sit back there in the closet, and cry about it. And I just decided that it was time to emerge out into the world with no eyebrows, grow a killer beard, and start whipping ass on the racetrack again. And that's what we've managed to do. I get a lot of credit, a lot. And while I do think of myself as a pretty decent wheelman, I've been given some really, really nice equipment, which makes it easier for us as drivers to shine. Erica's probably go down as the best, one of the best, if not the best pro stock drivers to ever sit in the seat. And while she could probably do it in about any car, she drives the best of the best. They make the best power. I've got some of the best minds behind the keyboards, and it just makes her job easier. And she would tell you that. And I'm in the same boat. I've got a lot of smart people in my corner that make driving a race car easy. It's just my job to sit in there and do it. And like Mark Ingersoll says, you can either do it or you cannot. And I feel like I'm one that can.
You are, definitely. Watching you on and off the track has just been incredible. But while we're still on the serious little note, I want to touch on some of the safety measures that have happened, all the positives. You said it yourself. You can't change anything. All you can do is just move on and try and better the sport and better what you guys are doing. So talk to us a little bit about some of the changes that were made and what cliff you basically died on to make this a safer sport.
Well, first and foremost, the speeds at which we were running, the times we were running, and the equipment we were using, the fuels that we started to use, all that evolved way faster than the safety program. So like cars are picking up tenths of a second at a time over the course of a year. And we were wearing the same old fire jacket we wore back in, the early 2000s in our bracket cars, right? So we just that just didn't fast enough. And unfortunately, in the sport that we all love, and literally have devoted our lives to, we are a reactive bunch instead of a pro. It takes something bad happening to someone for everybody to go, oh man, maybe we should change something. And a perfect example of that is that night that I crashed, there was a a vendor on the Midway that sold head socks. And he sold out that night. So that tells you how many people were there that night that should have had a head sock on that didn't, and because they saw me nearly burned to death, they decided, man, I should go get a head sock, and fire systems became a thing if they weren't already. There were new ones developed. I was a part of some of Spa Technique's fire aid system and the auto sense block that they use in the cars now. I've been a part of the development of some of these systems and had been asked my input on how things should be mounted and whatnot, and again, I'm thankful that people have reacted in the way that they have, but it still shows how unprepared we were, as this umbrella group. So, again, I wouldn't do it again, but I do think that my crash has saved some lives. There have been some pretty serious door car fires. Brendan Mills is the first one that comes to mind. And he's told me multiple times, whether it be the anniversary of his fire or just a random text, man, I just appreciate what you've done, because of you, I had the right stuff on in the car, and I didn't, that's why my face is burned up, my hands got burned up, my feet got burned up, and that's where my safety program was lacking the night that I nearly burnt to death in Georgia, and I've changed that. You can attest. You've been at the car with me when I'm suited up, and the same stuff I wear in Beer Money. If that's some of you guys are familiar with that car, is the same thing I climb in an NHRA Pro Mod car, the same thing I wore in Randy Meyer's Top Alcohol Dragster. It's all the same stuff, and it's because I know that the fire shows no mercy. If there's one thing, if there's any young ones out there that are watching and you aspire to build a Beer Money-esque Fox body, is that when those things decide to catch on fire, you can't stop it. So be prepared, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Don't wish you had it and not. Go ahead and get it, because every second matters when you're on fire in one of those things.
I feel like when we were kids racing, even in the junior stuff, they would check our arm restraints and make sure that we were all dialed in with the safety stuff. And you'd kind of mock it because you wanted to get out of your car and drive the finish line. And it was almost a cool thing to kind of skimp a little on the safety stuff. And I truly believe, my sister caught on fire and damn near could have died if all of those rules hadn't been changed. So I personally love that about what you've done, but I think you've almost made it cool again. Like if you know Lyle Barnett, he's one of the coolest dudes ever. Always got these cool sunglasses, always got a Yingling or some kind of beard, big old beard, like one of the coolest guys. And I think that we're all destined to be somebody, and it all evolves in a way that we don't have any control over. And I know you and I are both religious people, and that's a God thing in our world, but I think that you were born to do this and born to be a cool idol to kids, to make sure that we're doing this deal right. And just as a fangirl of yours, I think you've made a huge difference, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. So that's enough about the serious stuff. Wanted the world to know who you are, why you have this drive, but you and I have become very good friends over the last few years. You mentioned you came over to Elite Motorsports, raced with my sister, but you and I are a rare breed of folk. I think we have the same kind of personality. We're both always out there to have a good time. I want to talk about our friendship a little bit. I was a little intimidated by you whenever you first started coming around. You had this big name, and I live in a snow globe where I think that what we do is nobody cares what we do, and Elite Motorsports is just kind of trucking along. But I feel like you might have had the same kind of situation in your head. So talk to me a little bit about your first impressions of Elite and me and Erica and Richard and coming into our big bad world.
Well, the whole Lyle Barnett's going to drive Pro Mod for Elite Motorsports happened in like 2 weeks.
Fair.
Elk shot. And he's like, hey, man, this Pro Mod's available. You want to drive it? And I'm like, yep. And 2 weeks later, I'm on a flight to Fort Worth, and I'm sitting in a conference room with you, Erica, Richard Freeman, a couple of the others that were working at the show. Wes Buck was there. I've got my dad and Tommy Kirk with me, and we're like, bug-eyed and sitting in this conference room like we're getting interrogated, and so very first, I was, you're right. And why you decided to allow me in the group is beyond me, but here I am. But we go to dinner that night, and I left with their phone numbers, call me anytime you need anything. And I told my dad, I said, that's not what I expected. I expected it to be like, we'll get back to you, take a few notes, and they would get picked up by some escort service, and then they were going to an airport and going to fly off in some private jet. While they may have flown off in the jet, that's just not the impression that we got, right? It was that, we're just, and they are, Richard's like, we're just rednecks that like to spend a lot of money and race, and that's exactly what they are, but they're really good at it. And so I felt like if I was going to make us be successful, that this is probably one of my better options, and it proved to be probably the best option. I don't know that I could have done what I did anywhere else. So I guess another long-winded way for me to say that I had no idea what being racing in the NHRA was going to be like, but they're just like me. They're just like us. I do give an example that I feel like when I'm at an NHRA race, I need to have my shirt tucked in, but it's professional motorsports, and that's to a degree is kind of the way you have to be. You don't need to go up there in a tube top or anything, but for the most part, behind the scenes and at the hotel bar, we're all the same. We've all done this for way too long. We've all spent way too much money, and we all cannot get enough of the sport that we love. and we all drink the same. We all put our shoes and socks on the same way. And Erica just takes about 45 minutes longer to get ready than anybody else at an NHRA national event.
You're being kind with that 45 minutes, by the way. You're being very kind.
And
for you to say that NHRA's where you come tuck in your shirt, you and I have quite literally slapped each other on the face with tortillas, and you're going to talk to me about being professional in our pit.
In the pits. Yeah, we have. You're right. You're right. But I feel like behind the ropes,
really has.
Different. But I would have done it. I said, I feel like behind the ropes, it's a little different. But in the same sentence, if Jason Logan would have hyped it up, we would have done it on the starting line. So there's that.
Oh, yes. You and I feel like the world maybe needs to keep us away on any kind of big stage like that, because we would take those T-shirt shooting guns, and instead of shooting them at the fans, we'd probably shoot them at each other.
Yeah, right in the face.
Each other. You know it. So we've had a lot of good times. Like, no doubt, you coming onto the elite program was one of my favorite things. You brought a different energy. I was always escaping over to your pit to hang out, eat lunch, whatever. But let's talk about some of the big moments. There's a lot of ups and downs in drag racing. Those people who follow the as we call it, the roundy round sport. We have a lot of opportunity to win and lose every single day, 4 or 5 times a day in drag racing. So there's a lot of emotional roller coasters. Some of the big ones, obviously, that I want to talk about. I want to talk about Dallas first. Talk to me a little bit about the emotion behind winning that very first Pro Mod race.
Yeah, we had a pretty rough year in the Pro Charge car. Our program just really wasn't where it needed to be. I was discouraged because I've been very fortunate. Yeah, I've been very successful. It'd been a long time since I'd won a year without winning a race. And I thought coming over there that it might take me a couple to get kind of settled in, but that I'd find a way to win. And I'll be honest, we went to Charlotte in the Pro Charge car. I didn't qualify at home. And I was just ready to, maybe this just isn't what I need to be doing, and at dinner that night, Richard Freeman said, well, why don't we just pull the turbo car back out? You know how to drive a turbo car. Let's try it. And at that point, it was anything like jet-powered roller skates, and they would let me in on the starting line at Dallas, and I was in. So like the next week, the turbo car shows up. Justin, Elks, Ben, and Mike, they completely go through the car. We run to Darlington real quick, test it. I staged it a couple of times, let go of the button. Nothing fell off, and it made it 100 feet. And Justin's like, screw it, put it in the box. We're going to Dallas. I'm like, oh, this is my kind of deal right here. I love showing up with just absolutely, totally unprepared. So we get to Dallas, made several good runs in the shakedowns at the Stampede of Speed. We had the opportunity to test prior to the race, thankfully. We roll into qualifying, really didn't qualify that good first couple runs, made a pretty good poke to qualify 12th, I think. And while I was glad to be in something new, I'm still like, golly, man, here we are in the bottom half. Nothing's changing. What the hell are we doing? And race day rolled around, and I decided that morning we're not going to lose one on the starting line. I can tell you that. So we go up there first round, make a good rip, really close race with Belushi, win second round. I beat Mike Salinas, I think, in the second round, beat J.R. Gray. And then in the final, I had Justin Bond, and he tried a little trickery on the starting line, hung me out a little while on the two-step. But it's really hard to beat an elite motorsports team when all 96 of them are standing behind you on the starting line. He tried to hang me out there. I left his head laying on the starting line. And I think I beat him by just over 2 thou to the stripe to win my first ever NHRA national event. And what was going on in the car was one thing, but there's a video that I hope y'all can play when you play this back of the entire starting line going absolutely bananas behind me. And that's one of those times that you wish you could pull the parachute, and when you hit the ignition switch, you could just teleport to the starting line.
Teleport.
Because what went on there was just so cool. I still watch that video. I watched it the other day. But to win the first one there, obviously I would have loved to have win it at home, but to win my very first NHRA national event with the entire Elite Motorsports crew there, because that's as close as y'all race to Elite Motorsports itself. Everybody was there. First race in the turbo car, first time that Jake's car and Jim Harrison's car had won a national event, first Pro Mod win for Elite Motorsports. It was huge. I said it in my interview that I could not even see when I turned off the racetrack. I was crying so hard. But the celebration just moved to the top end of the racetrack. all of you guys came down. We celebrated there. I got to ride in the truck back up the racetrack with all of the Camping World winners. I think that day, me, Matt Smith, and Greg Anderson all won, which were all three of us from North Carolina, which I thought was cool. But just an unbelievable one I'll never forget. I mean, I won the U.S. Nationals this year or this past season, and it still doesn't top the first win in Dallas. And Dallas was the first win of two that season in nearly back-to-back weekends. So we had a pretty good run there towards the end of 2021.
I'm glad you brought that up about the starting line, and because I was there. I think I'm the one who filmed that video that you're talking about. You are in the car, don't get to enjoy.
Yeah,
you're in the car. You don't get to enjoy the celebration much like I get to be behind the camera and don't get to enjoy the celebration. But is that something that you can feel when you're in the car? Because none of our cars were still in. We had about 200 people at this racetrack visiting, crew members, family members, and having that huge crowd. It's like the new age of the Coletta mosh pit from back in the day. It's like the Elite Motorsports squat up. Is that something that you can feel, especially when Justin Vaughn tried to do something squirrely there on the starting line?
I could feel it when my wind light came on, because all I could hear in my radio was and I was like, holy shit, we just won. Of course, there's a little wind light that you can see on into the shutdown, and I knew I had won then. But yeah, I mean, you can tell by just your crew chief's voice in the radio, and whoever else. I think Chase Freeman had him around the waist and was screaming in there too, and oh yeah, you can feel it. It's even without the radio, I just imagined in my mind like what my dad was doing, and kind of what the starting line looked like. I had no idea that all of you were on the starting line. You just don't, pull through the burnout box. I'm looking at one person, and that's Justin Elks. Do a burnout backup. Everybody's behind the car. I had no idea that all of you were there until after the race. But that one meant as much. Even if that was a second or third win, it would have meant as much, just because all of my people were there, and it was just cool to experience that with everybody for the very first one.
We've won a lot as a team, and I'll say on an emotional level, that was probably one of my top 3 moments that I've had in the 10, 11 years that I've been with Elite Motorsports. So you win Dallas, you go on, you win Vegas, get you one of those special edition black Wallies, and then Indy this past year. So we're going to we're going to get into lights out here in a second. But on the NHRA side of this, you kind of maybe just answered this for me, but you've got 2 big things here. You've got Indy, which is the Super Bowl. It's everything in drag racing. But when you have an emotional win like Dallas, compare those 2 for me and where they stand on your all-time.
I mean, you'll take a win any way you can get one. And, I'm a firm believer that when I beat Mike Castellano by like 7 thou on a hole shot in the round 1, that we had, I'm not going to say I knew we had won, but I had a good feeling when I beat Mike on a hole shot in the very first round. I won the semis and the final round from my opposing racer, one of them being Eric Dillard and the other one, Chris Thorne, red lighting against me and, literally just giving me the win. But
no, I'm going to cut you off there. They don't give you the win. People red light against you because they know that you are an absolute tree chopper. So you earn those red lights.
Yeah. My dad and we dreamed of going to Indy and watching the race. The first time we ever went to the U.S. Nationals, I burned in the Pro Mod in 2021, which was cool. And then in the second year, we bring home the Wally, and that one's always going to be very special, right? When National Dragster wrote the recap, it doesn't say down there in their little caption that Lyle Barnett won only because of a red light. It just says winner in Pro Modified Lyle Barnett, and that's all that really matters. But from an emotional standpoint, nothing will ever compare to Dallas. It was at that moment, I felt like it was full circle. Like I had started racing, I nearly died doing it, and now we have made it to the professional ranks, and I've capped it off with a win. And like you win one of those. Like Stevie told me at the top end when I won Vegas, the first time's a fluke, the second time's a streak. And I felt like I had proved myself that I was worthy and that I belonged racing NHRA Pro Modified, and that I then became, one of the more feared drivers on the starting line, that you come up there and let go have a 40 or a 50 light. I've probably got you by 20 or 30, and that's what I've always strived to be, is somebody that was feared on the starting line. It feels good to know that even in 2 weeks, well, next week, but in 2 weeks when I pull in the burnout box in a car I've never driven at the World Series of Pro Mod, that somebody's going to be like, if I'm not on my game right here, Lyle's going to cut my freaking head off, and that feels good to know that's kind of the reputation that I have.
Oh, they know it for sure, and that's why you fit in great with us. So talk Pro Mod for a second. You mentioned the turbo cars. Stevie, JR, all the guys, you have a great rapport. They kind of give you shit. They joke around with you, calling you a turbo guy. Like that, not a lot of guys were running these turbos, saying you got hair dryers, this and that. Well, then you go step into a screw blown car. Talk to us a little bit about that experience, because you vowed online, I heard you, I saw you, I quoted you, that is your favorite thing to drive and you will never drive anything else.
Yeah, it's now granted, I'm going to go drive a twin turbo 65 C10 truck next week. My heart is still with the turbos. I've loved them forever. My no prep car has turbos on it. But there is nothing like one of these big old nasty blowers like sitting behind me on my toolbox here. There's nothing like one. The screw blower, I've never driven a Roots blown Pro Mod, but I will at the World Series in Chip King's Mach 1 Mustang. But there is nothing that compares to a crank-driven, freaking big old nasty Roots or screw blower sitting out, poking up out of the hood, pterodactyl neck style. So I hope to have the opportunity to continue to drive these cars of this caliber. Would I never get back in a turbo car? That's not true. I would absolutely.
No, you get in any. We all know it.
If Mark Mickey called me next week and said, "Hey, man, we're going to go try to break the quarter-mile record, and I think I want you to drive," I would literally, I probably wouldn't even pack a bag. I'd leave the house in my underwear if I had to. But there is nothing that compares to those big old stanky blowers, I can tell you that.
All right, so you kind of transitioned for me. World Series of Pro Mod, before we get into lights out, you were on the list. Then you got off the list, and now you're back on the list. And I think it is absolute poetic justice, because you can't have the World Series of Pro Mod without some of the biggest stars. And like I've gloated you enough on this episode. I'll go back to normal talking shit to you soon. But you're one of the greatest stars, and I think you needed to be there. So how did this deal with Chip King come about?
So I had a ride for the World Series of Pro Mod. Nobody's fault, really. It just didn't work out. And I actually had a total of 3. And I felt like with 3, there's no way it doesn't work, right? And all 3 of my original rides that I had planned, in no particular order, I just knew that I would have one. All 3 fell through. And literally 4 weeks ago, I didn't have a ride. And I had told Wes, like, dude, I don't know. I'm going to look. I'm going to start asking. If you see me work in the corner, just turn your head. But I'm going to do everything I can to make it. And I made a couple phone calls. I just honestly didn't put 2 and 2 together. Chip King, local North Carolina guy, Justin Carmack's shop up near Eden, North Carolina, in Pelham. I was given their number, and I called them literally just on a whim and was like, hey, I need a ride. Do you have an extra car? I knew they had another car. They had just ran both of them at the U.S. Street Nationals, also at Bradenton. Both ran really well. And literally Chip's like, yeah, man, I do have another car. This is the price. And if you want it, the ride's yours. We'd be glad to have you. And it just kind of worked out, and usually when it's that late in the game, and you just got to go with what you can find, it may not necessarily be something that can compete. You're just going to have to get in something just to be there. And that is absolutely not the case with this car. This thing is 100% capable of winning. It ran really well at the U.S. Street Nationals. It has the possibilities to be the fastest Roots car to ever go up and down the racetrack with an open converter. And I really, truly feel like we can qualify at the top of the sheet. And that when it comes finals time on Sunday afternoon in Bradenton, that I may be the one that you're talking about. So I'm very thankful for Justin Carmack, Terry Coyle, and Chip King for giving me the opportunity. And I told them, I said, look, I'm going down there to win $100,000 and be known as the World Series Pro Mod champion in 2023. If y'all have other plans, then we're on 2 different pages, and I need to look elsewhere. And they are 100% in. I'm literally leaving Valdosta Sunday after I win No Time Pro Truck, of course, in Warpath, driving straight to Bradenton, and we start testing Monday morning, So I will get out of a twin turbo 65 C10 and right into the Mach 1 Roots Blown Mustang of Chip King's on Monday. So the next 2 weeks are going to be wild, but I'm just excited that I'm going to go to Bradenton in a car that can win. All of the cars I had previously hoped to drive were all capable of winning. And like I said, you get in these situations, and sometimes you just gotta. It's kind of like pulling out a 9-iron when you've lost your 7. You're going to be a little bit short, but at least you can get close. But this is a car that can win, and that's exactly what we plan to do.
Well, we got tons of World Series of promo talk coming, so we'll get into that in later weeks. But lights out time. This is kind of like where you live, South Georgia Motorsports Park, going back to duck races. Talk to me a little bit about ducks races before we get into these classes and what you're running. These things, I remember just being an NHRA tunnel vision kind of person, hearing about this radial world and not really having the space to learn much about it, where I lean on you heavily in that sense. But they were like a phenomenon. These became like these events that people were dying to get into. Even racers that had an off weekend were bringing their toter homes out there and just parking. Why are ducks races so popular, and what's the hype?
We amongst ourselves, we ask the same question, like, how has that became the standard? And I honestly don't know why. It's just, he was the first to really try and promote a big radial or a big event, period. Like in our little world outside of the NHRA, like, and I agree, like the NHRA to us before I became a part of it was like this thing, like it just existed out there. We had never heard of any of the people that raced in it. Like, it was just like you were I honestly, I assumed everybody was from the West Coast, and that's just the way it worked, and out here, us outlaw East Coast 8th milers, we just did our own thing. And Donald was the first one to really set a big stage for us grassroots backwoods. At the time, drag radials, they were running on BFGs back then, and we were super slow, and and it was just kind of a place where twice a year, everybody gathered and showed your stuff, and over the course of, like, I went to Lights Out 3, I think, and it was, a fairly big event. It was bigger than anything I raced at locally at home, but it was not near the magnitude of what it is today and what it has been over the past probably 8 years. But Donald was just the first one to pay the big money, and to bring in the live stream and to do all the things that made us feel like that we belonged on somewhat of a level that compared to what was shown on ESPN back when NHRA was there, and on Fox today. And, so I still don't know how Donald has managed to hang on. He's very forward with his Facebook post and what he says on the internet. But he gets tons of support. Like, you and I will be there next week, and on Friday and Saturday, you won't be able to stir the fans with a stick. It'll take 30 minutes to get from the top end back to my pit, which is all the way on the other side of the racetrack. But still, like, it's insane how popular, and people save vacation days. And, like, this is a big deal for grassroots style drag racing fans, and now there are professional teams there, right? Hired guns. Proline will have, complete sectors of the pits roped off for their customers, and the best of the best tuners. Jamie Miller just named Tuner of the Year, but for the DI Awards, will be on property, probably tuning more cars than he can count on his two hands. And it's, for drag radial outlaw style 8th mile drag racing, that is it. It is the grand poobah. Lights Out. It is the U.S. Nationals of the outlaw 8th mile style racing, and it's the reason that you, Courtney Enders, and that Elite Motorsports, and that all of you now know me. It's where I came from. It's where I got my start, and where my roots are, and I never forget where I came from. I hope to always race there while it exists. And I'm pumped. I'm as excited to go there as I am to leave and go straight to the World Series. Again, I've got a truck there that I'm going to be driving that can win. And, that's exactly what we plan to go there and do. So it's different. If you've never been to one, I highly suggest you go check it out. You can tune in next week on Flo and watch the live feed, get a little feel for kind of what it is. But I'm sure you would agree, Courtney, that you've been to a bunch of racetracks and experienced a bunch of drag races, but there's something different about those. It's just it's a marathon. It's fast. It's out of control. crashes. You name it, it happens at a Duck X Productions race. We just won't get into too much what happens after hours.
Yeah, it's an event too, and I think it's kind of like a if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And he set this precedence that if no one else cared, he was going to make these drivers and these winners feel like the biggest stars of the sport, literally kings. He gives you a throne and a robe and a crown when you win. My very first one, my very first time on the mic with FloRacing was actually at Lights Out. I went there, had no idea, had never pit reported in my life, only knew about 3 of you guys there. And so it was just this whole new learning experience. But the memory that I take away from that was the winner's circle. So I thought we were wrapped. I thought we were done. They hand me a mic, put ears in, and they're like, okay, we're going to do a live winner's circle. Duck wants to do the winner's circle live. I had no freaking idea what I was getting into. I had only met Duck on the surface. It was like 30 minutes of madness. I mean, this man stole my microphone, going around to these thrones. They're driving golf carts up and down the racetrack with the winners in it. It is such a cool deal. So let's flash forward to next week when you're in that winner's circle. Talk to us about the car that you'll be in there with.
Yeah, so it's a 65 C10 called Warpath, twin turbo Hemi, very similar power plant to what was in my NHRA Pro Mod car, slightly bigger turbos, but this thing is a barn door. It is as aerodynamic as a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Get that out. But it's fast. They run a no time pro truck, so it's an all truck class. And it will be one of the many very unique cars that you will see there. Unlike Pro Stock or Pro Mod, it's not full of new body Camaros. You'll see a ton of Mustangs, but some first generation Novas, lots of first generation Camaros. I'll be in a truck. There'll be several other trucks there. You just never know what you're going to see and what some of these guys create. A lot of these cars originally, when the Duck deal started, were backyard built, in a little garage like I'm sitting in here. Not so much anymore. It takes a little more professionally built chassis to really compete in the upper echelon of these classes. But it's cool, man. I won this race last year and it's fast. It's 200 mile an hour. It's a riot. So. Like I said, if you can tune in on Flow next week, this is drag racing like you've never seen, if you have never seen it. So it's something that I suggest you try to tune into.
So I'm kind of new to this outlaw portion of drag racing, and going to these races for Flow has really opened my eyes. But I want to dive into a couple of the classes here just to explain what we're doing. So I'm going to lean on you heavily here for education. Is there a difference in these classes? There's a ton of classes. I'm looking at a list. Radio versus the World, Pro 275, LDR, X 275, Limited Street. It goes on and on and on. All steel, all glass. Is everybody kind of treated like a professional there? Or is there a definition between, the sportsman side of things and the pro categories like there is in PDRA and NHRA?
I mean, it's pretty much like anything else. At Radio versus the World at a Duck X production style race is the top fuel. If you've watched an HRA of radial racing, Pro 275, I would consider the funny car. Very similar looking cars, both deep 3-second, eighth mile players. You'll see the top half of the Radio versus the World field in the low 360s, high 350s. Some maybe in the low 350s. You'll see the front runners in Pro 275 in the mid to high 360s. All over 200. Limited drag radial is what I would consider the pro stock. Still a very entertaining class and something that is a part of what I would consider the professional category of this. X275 ranks right up there. Ultra Street, so there are kind of tiers, I guess you would say, to what is considered, and it's really by speed. I really, and it's the same thing, I guess you would say, in the NHRA. The faster classes are kind of what are the most desirable to watch for the general fan. But as a whole, any of those drag radial classes, they're great side-by-side racing. Most of them are split up by really the amount of horsepower they can make. Radio versus the World is kind of uncorked. They have a minimum weight, but power adder, really no limit. They're on a 315 drag radial, which is the biggest of the drag radial tires that you will see at an outlaw style Duck X Productions race. And most of the classes are they're separated by either tire size and engine combination, or just one of the two, and then a minimum weight. Most of these in the upper 2000s, as far as weight is concerned, some over 3,000 pounds, which even, in race car world, that's pretty heavy. Like when we're talking about pro mods and pro stock cars, they're in the 2,500-ish pound range. That'll be very, very, very light as far as weight is concerned for any of these drag radial cars. Most of them in the 2,800 pound range up to 3,000. So on a DOT style tire and a racetrack that could pull the soul out of your body, they have to prep these things to the gills. You have to be a seasoned track walker, or either know how or know what to wear to walk on one of these racetracks. And it's something that some people just don't understand. Is the amount of work that goes into offering and providing a surface that is capable of handling the kind of power that these cars put down. The radial versus world cars literally make more power than my NHRA Pro Mod car. They are more unlimited than my NHRA Pro Mod car, and they're fast, man. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. My mind was blown. I sat in the grandstands the first time that I went there just to absorb it and I was absolutely blown away by the speed of these things. But I'm glad you brought up the racetrack. So something that people ask me, especially at Flo, that don't know drag racing, is like, how are people falling on the starting line and why are their shoes coming off? And that is something that is so unique to our sport. And you do have to be a seasoned walker. You got to kind of roll to the outside of your soles or tiptoe it or whatnot. So for those of the folks that will be tuning into Lights Out that don't know much about drag racing, you've got to keep your eye on people on the starting line, because you will see, I've seen the best of the best fall over, like the greatest crew chiefs of all time fall over smooth in the middle. Have you ever fallen on the starting line?
I have. Well, a lot of times what causes the fall is that when you're confident that you're about to pull your shoe off and you really don't, and if it decleats you, if it pulls your shoe out, you're going down. I've had it pull the sole of my shoe off. If I had my own clouds on, I would show you what a radial track does. It's separating it or down around the bottom. And I'm going to wear them next week, and you may very well see me get stuck to the racetrack. But yeah, the people who are just unfamiliar with it, the real seasoned veterans wear golf shoes. So if you see a guy out there just cruising around like nothing's going on, man, he's not having trouble sticking to the racetrack. I wonder what he's doing different. He's wearing golf shoes or cleats of some sort. So the less surface area touching that racetrack, the better off you are. But it's tough to comprehend how sticky that the racetrack is. Literally, you just need to come and step on it yourself, because when that track is really good, especially in the evening hours or into the night, it is unbelievable. But that's what it takes for these drag radial tires to get down that racetrack, as opposed to your NHRA cars, which you control a tire spin. These radials do not spin. They stick it and drive it off, and it's just a little different style of racing, and we require that kind of track prep. So if you do tune in, you'll see the tractors up and down the track a good bit, and that's just because the track has to be that good for these cars to, one, for it to be safe, and two, for these cars to perform at their maximum potential, which we're in the entertainment business. That's really what we got to provide, so it's got to be good.
I actually lost a shoe at US Street. I was trying to be all cutesy on the microphone and wore my sparkly slip-ons, and like an amateur, just smooth lost my shoe. But you mentioned the tractors and the track prep that goes on at these racetracks. Sometimes if you're tuning in, the live stream in a drag race, I've always said drag racing is tough to watch live if you don't really understand and know what's happening. And that may be frowned upon to say, but educating people on how these events go, I think, is really crucial in keeping their attention. And so I'm glad you touched on that, because let's talk about track prep for a little bit and how important it is. When you tune into a FloDragRacing event and you see a tractor going up and down, you think, oh, the race is down, somebody crashed, we oiled it down. But this is a mandatory part of what makes you guys go. So how important is the track prep and the person who actually manual labor puts their art down onto that racetrack to keep you guys safe?
Yeah, there are only a handful of guys in the country who are considered like the track prep professionals. I'm not going to name them because I'll miss one and then I'll get hate mail. But there's literally just there's a handful of guys who really, really know, and it's like I've said many times, when the air is good. How do I explain this? When it's cooler outside, nighttime especially, Courtney Enders and I could successfully prep a radial track. It's just not that hard. But it's when the conditions change and that person has to make a decision on what to do with the glue and how they spray it, how fast the sprayer goes up and down the racetrack when they're spraying it. Because obviously the faster you go, the less gets in one spot. The slower you're going, the thicker the layer of glue is. Which way to drag it, whether you drag it with a rotator or a flat drag. Like there's all these things that matter. And that is when the track prep personnel is so crucial. And at next week's event, you'll see some of the easiest conditions to prep a racetrack, and you will see the guys on the starting line or the track prep professionals scratching their heads. There'll be shirt hanging off to one side and smeared dirt and grease on their face, and they look like they've been beat to death. It's because they've been working all day to try to provide a racetrack that is good enough for these radial cars to go up and down. And it's hard, and I feel for them a lot of the times, especially when we're out having a good time and riding around on a golf cart at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're about halfway through scraping the entire racetrack, and they've got another 2 or 3 hours left. I've seen Tyler Crossnow literally never leave the racetrack, just walk up in the tower and take a nap, But the prep on the track itself is so crucial. If not, and you tune into a radial race, it's pretty tough to watch. And on in the same sentence, it's also became a bit of an issue for radial racing. The no prep deal has become such a big thing. No prep kings, street outlaws have brought this new kind of a new demographic of fan into our space, but they are used to watching cars go up and down the racetrack no matter what. Like, why are these tractors out here? And there's all this backlash and bad talk about radial racing, and it's unfortunate because we've done it to ourselves as drivers and tuners and crewmen or team owners. We have just over the years have demanded this just stellar track prep. We only want to run at night. We only want to run when the conditions are to us, and it's made it hard for the fan to watch. And I think you're going to see a wave. I think you're going to see a change. I think Tyler Crossnow was really the first to do it, but you're about to see a transition from just solely radial cars to guys that are going to start running on a bias ply. They're going to start running on a slick. And the reason for that is it just takes less track prep. The general fan, just the attention span is short. And we've got to keep cars going down the racetrack. That's what keeps them entertained. Every car that goes up and down the racetrack, let's be honest, we all like to see a good crash. That's why we all watch NASCAR. And the more cars going up and down the racetrack, the less likely that one of the fans is going to get their wish, and I don't want to see anybody crash, but that's why they watch. And, as the radial tires have demanded more prep, it's caused less and less. I don't know about necessarily if just the general fan is more likely to watch a pro mod than they are a radial tire today. And it's just due to the insane track prep. Now, next week, you're going to see Sydney and the guys at South Georgia Motorsports Park work their ass off to get the track prepared. So be a little easy on them in the comments when you're on there talking about too much tractor, because they're just trying to provide a surface that's even and fair for everybody, and one that can produce some of the numbers that all of you want to see, 3-second runs at over 200 miles an hour. It's what we're all there for. And that's what it takes. So it's super important. It's everything at a drag radial race. You can have the best equipment, the best tires, the best tuner, the best everything. You can have it all. And if the track is not there, it's not going down the racetrack, period. So with all these with the guys that have spent these millions of dollars to get their rigs and crew and hotels and food and fuel and tires and all the things that come, engine maintenance, all the things that come along with running one of these cars, it's on this responsibility of the track to give them a surface that is, I guess, worthy. And that's what you'll see them do next week. They're very good at it. One of the best radial surfaces in the country. And I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I agree with you. Give them a break. Instead of when we look at these tractors on the racetrack, when you tune in and it's a tractor, instead of getting annoyed, I think that we can kind of change the narrative and say, hey, they're getting ready for a good show. So I want to do, we've got lights out next week, and I have a feeling you and I will be doing some fun content. We always do something stupid at the racetrack for the Shake and Bake show. We are all on a million podcasts in the drag racing industry. We're not gatekeepers. We're not only watch minds. So you guys got to keep your eye out for that stuff. But before we wrap it up here and we head out to Valdosta, I made a post yesterday and got quite a few questions. Told the world you were going to be my first guest on this show. And I wanted to get the world knowledgeable about you, about Lights Out. Your story is a little bit of an emotional story. So I want to break the ice now and get into some fun questions that we got from, your favorite people in the world, the internet.
Perfect.
My favorite first, right? They love you, right? My favorite first. I think everybody lately is associating this with you. When they think of you, they think of this rivalry with J.R. Gray. How did this rivalry start? And are you guys even really friends, or is it real?
So we both come from kind of the same background. JR came up kind of an outlaw. He was more of a true down roots grudge racer. I didn't really ever do a whole lot of grudge racing unless it was just for some small money here and there. But we both came from the Outlaw Drag Radio 8th Mile ranks. Both were, he was a multi-time winner at Duck X Productions race. I myself the same. And we both came into the NHRA the same year as rookies. We actually raced each other in the quarterfinals at the Gator Nationals, at our very first race, and he beat me on a hole shot. And I told him then, I said, look, well, I'm not going to say on here what I really said, but that this ain't over, and I am going to get you back for that one, buddy. And I gave it to him in the finals at the very last race of the year, beat him on a hole shot there in Vegas. But I think it more just came from us both being rookies, both wanting to be the best, both of us gunning for the next win. He's won one, he won Bristol in between my Dallas and Vegas win. But he went winless this past year, and he's down about it. He told me, he's like, man, I ain't never been a year without winning a race. That just attests to how hard it is to win over there. It's the best of the best, and the NHRA Pro Mod field is super competitive. But no, JR and I are cool. But we do like to talk some smack. I got a grudge race with him on Friday night down at the World Series of Pro Mod. And I plan to do exactly what I did to him at the Snowbirds, and that's watch him come over with his tail tucked between his legs and start laying down hundreds on top of my toolbox. So, but no, JR and I, our rivalry is real. There's nobody I want to beat more than him, maybe Ricky Smith. But our rivalry is very real. But now we're completely cool. We don't fight in the pits or have any kind of weird background. Just a good interclass rivalry there.
I think that's what's cool about you guys and a lot of these rivals in drag racing is once you suit up, it's a different ball game. But then we're sitting at the bar, having a cocktail, joking around, making TikToks with his wife, So It is nice to see you guys be friends. But it is an intense rivalry, and I love it. So a couple rapid fire ones before we knock this out of the park here. Chase Freeman, I think you might know this guy. He has a very important question from you. Who is your favorite Freeman, and why is it Chase Freeman?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one between him, Robert, Royce Lee, and I guess I could throw Richard in there, and Casey. Honestly, my favorite Freeman was probably Grandpa. One of the best probably, and the reason that they all exist. So you can thank him for that, Chase. But I had the opportunity to spend some quality time with Grandpa, and unfortunately, as most of you know or may not, we lost him last year, and it was a really sad deal. And I miss seeing him at the racetrack there towards the end of the year. We had some conversations while I was suited up in a race car that I can't talk about on here. In fact, the best one under the tower in Atlanta, which is no longer there. And my last memory will be of that conversation with him, and neither one of them are here anymore, and we'll just leave it at that. But my favorite Freeman by far, Grandpa Freeman.
I couldn't agree with you more there, even though Royce Lee always thinks it's him. This one I really liked from Brett Allen. It said, Chuck Norris has another fist behind his beard, supposedly. So what lives behind Lyle Barnett's beard? Is it a Yingling?
You don't want to know. I can't tell you that. That's like a secret weapon. It's like asking for the passcode to my safe or something, man. Just don't sneak up on me. Thing might.
That's why you get mad if I touch it. That's why you only let me one touch a weekend.
Yeah, don't one touch. If you touch it again, something bad could happen to you.
I know the rules. We know the rules. We ain't talking about the rules. If you were to get in a bracket car, what would it be? They know you're good on the, first off, what would it be? We know you're good on the tree. And would your finish line driving compare to you knocking the tree down?
No. So I got in a bracket car a year ago at the New Year's race at Bradenton. And I'll be honest, drove a year of NHRA Pro Mod, thought I was tough stuff. I went down there. I was like, how hard could it be? All you got to do is cut a light and drive the finish line. Well, I never won a round. I bought back every time and never won. I never won a round ever. I never, not in a test run, nothing. Like I never won a round. My finish line driving skills are subpar at best. It is something I feel like I could get better at. Friends with Matt Dottis, who had probably one of the best years any bracket racers had in a very long time. I actually slip seated with Jeff Serra at the same race, one of the best bracket racers of all times. So I surrounded myself with good talent, but that is definitely not something that is taught. That is something that is only experienced and learned. So not Lyle Barnett, not a good bracket racer.
Dude, that shit is way underrated. I think, everybody has their eyes on what's fastest. And those bracket racers that go out there and just kill it with 2-3 thou packages,
100%.
My hat's off to it. So I loved that question. And then just the last couple of fun ones, Jason Logan, Jenna Moorhead, everybody's mad that you're the first guest. But like, why wouldn't you be?
I know. Well, I mean, they're just jealous because they're not cool. Jason Logan's jealous because he doesn't have a beard like me. And Jenna is jealous because Chase doesn't have a beard like me. So it sucks to suck for you guys is all I can say. I'll always be the first. You can be next, never be first.
Well, I'd like to think that maybe they'll get better as they go on. So we're going to have to bring you back and bring in some segments. We're going to have some games as this progresses. So I hope that you will join me again, Lyle. And I really, really appreciate you coming on and just hanging out with me for an hour or so and educating the FloRacing audience on you, on drag racing, and on Lights Out. So just before you head on out, give us a little bit of where they can find you on social. I know you bank on the merch sales and all of that with your crazy beard. So let them know where to find you.
So you can literally just my name on both Facebook and Instagram, Lyle Barnett. We are now the proud owners of MacFab Beadlocks here. Be sure to follow us there. I post daily beadlock content. If you don't know what a beadlock is, give it the old Google machine try and then give me a call. You definitely have some wheels that can be beadlocked. I can assure you of that. But I've got a little TikTok that goes on. I've got a YouTube channel, Lyle Barnett Racing, that I update like once a year, but you can subscribe anyway. What does it hurt? It's free. But definitely follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'll definitely be updating that super consistently over the next couple weeks as Courtney and I are traveling the Southeast. But obviously, thanks to everybody at Flo, especially you, for having me on as your first guest. All the wonderful people behind the scenes helping us make it. And to you guys out there, it shoots out, visors down. We got drag racing to do.
That's right. And we will see everybody at Lights Out this coming weekend here at Valdosta. And I can't wait to do this again every other Friday. I'm going to bring you a new guest, new information, and new fun. So be sure to watch us on Right Off Track, brought to you by Castrol.